Hey guys, tonight we're going on a journey. But not the kind where you pack a suitcase and head to the airport. No, tonight you're going to slip into the worn leather boots of a 19th century postal courier. Your office isn't a building with fluorescent lights. It's the entire Sahara Desert, stretching out under a sun that doesn't just shine, it punishes. Your task is simple and utterly, breathtakingly insane: to carry a bag of letters from the Mediterranean coast all the way across the world's largest hot desert to the fabled city of Timbuktu. And then, of course, to bring the replies back. We're talking months of travel. We're talking about a world where a single piece of paper delivered could change the fate of a merchant's family or an empire's outpost. Forget Wi-Fi signals dropping. Here, the signal is your own heartbeat, thudding in your ears as you scan an endless, shimmering horizon. You'd last about, let's be generous, 20 minutes out there. I give you 10 before you start trying to drink the mirage water. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere cozy, maybe with a window showing a much tamer night, drop a comment below and tell me where you are and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are in Tripoli. It's 1845. The air is thick with the smell of salt from the harbor, spices from the souk, and the underlying, ever-present scent of dust. It's not a clean dust. It's dust that has seen empires rise and fall, carried on caravan winds for millennia. You've been hired, or more accurately, conscripted by a sense of desperation and the promise of pay that won't come until you return, if you return. Your hand closes around a leather satchel, surprisingly heavy. Inside are the hopes of a dozen men. Letters from Ottoman officials to remote garrison commanders, mercantile orders from Tripoli-based traders to their agents in the Sudan, and a few precious, sealed personal missives, their contents a mystery. This satchel is your reason for being. Lose it, and you might as well lie down in the sand. You meet your guide. His name is Muhammad, but that's all you'll get. He's a Tuareg, one of the legendary blue men of the desert, his indigo headscarf already staining the skin around his eyes a permanent, dignified shade. He looks at you not with hostility, but with a weary assessment, like a mechanic looking at a dubious engine. He doesn't speak your language. Communication is a series of gestures, nods, and the occasional grunt. His job is to get the satchel, and by extension you, across the desert. You're a piece of cargo that happens to walk and require water. The prep is surreal. You're given a cheche, a long strip of cloth to wrap around your head and face. You're slathered in a rancid butter mixture to protect your skin, the 19th century version of sunscreen. And let me tell you, you'll miss the coconut scent. You're issued a water skin that feels pitifully light. Muhammad checks the hooves of the camels with a tenderness he has yet to show you. These grumbling, groaning beasts are the engines of this operation. They can smell water from miles away. You'll learn to trust their instincts over your own eyes, which will soon start playing cruel, liquid tricks on you. A well-known historical event that sets the stage is the expansion of the Ottoman Empire's influence into North Africa, creating a desperate need for communication lines across their vast, unruly territories. But here's a bizarre, lesser-known fact. The most valuable item in your satchel might not be an official dispatch, but a letter sealed with a special wax containing ground-up scorpion tails, a believed deterrent against thieves and evil spirits. The historians still argue about the actual efficacy of scorpion tail wax, but they all agree on the psychological comfort it provided to the sender, sitting safely in a Tripoli courtyard, imagining his letter slithering safely through the dunes. You take one last look at the blue of the Mediterranean. It will be the last time you see that much water for a very, very long time. Muhammad makes a soft clicking sound. The camel beneath you lurches to its feet with a world-weary groan. And with that ungainly motion, the forgotten postal route through the Sahara begins. The city noises fade, replaced by the wind, the crunch of sand underfoot, and the slow, rhythmic sway that will become the soundtrack to your existence. The swaying doesn't stop. It becomes a part of you, a metronome for the slow passage of time. You leave the last scrubby outskirts of Tripoli behind, and the world simplifies into a brutal palette. The blinding white-yellow of the sky, the burnt orange and ochre of the earth, and the deep, endless blue of Muhammad's robe ahead of you. Your satchel is strapped across your chest, a constant, sweaty weight. You quickly learn the first rule of desert travel. Everything is about conservation. Conservation of energy, of movement, of words, and most critically, of moisture. You take small sips from your water skin, letting the tepid liquid sit in your mouth before swallowing, a ritual performed under Muhammad's watchful, disapproving eye. He drinks less than you notice. He seems to pull hydration from the dry air itself. Your destination for this first leg isn't a town. It's a concept, the Hamada al-Hamra, the Red Plateau. It sounds almost poetic. It is not. This is where the Sahara sheds any pretense of hospitality. The ground turns from sand to a vast, flat pavement of sun-baked stone and gravel, stretching to the horizon like a god's forgotten parking lot. The heat here is different. It doesn't just radiate from above. It rebounds from the stone beneath you, cooking you from both directions. The air shimmers with it, distorting the shapes of the other camels in your small caravan. There are 3 besides yours, carrying water, dates, and trade goods to barter at waypoints. Every pebble, every fissure in the rock, is etched with a sharp, black shadow. It's a landscape of absolute, silent geometry, and it's painfully loud. The wind, funneled across the flat plain, whines incessantly, and the crunch of camel hooves on gravel is a dry, grating percussion. You pull your cheche tighter, leaving only a slit for your eyes. The world narrows to that slit, to the swaying back of the camel, and to the weight of the letters. You think about the words inside, ink on paper so fragile. They feel absurdly out of place here, where everything is stone and thirst. You camp that first night on the Hamada. There is no shelter. You simply stop. Muhammad and the other Tuareg guides move with a quiet, efficient grace, unloading the camels, pegging them to stakes driven into a crack in the stone. A small, miserly fire is lit using dried camel dung. It burns with a faint, acrid smell and almost no smoke. Dinner is a handful of dates, a piece of hardened, stale bread called kshra, and a shared bowl of a gritty paste made from pounded grain and a splash of precious water. It tastes like dust, but it's fuel. You learn the second rule. The desert simplifies needs to their bare essence. Food is not for pleasure. It's to stop your body from consuming itself. As the fierce heat of the day bleeds away, it's replaced by a cold that seeps into your bones with shocking speed. You shiver in your robes, huddling near the feeble dung fire. The sky, now utterly black and free of any moisture or light pollution, is a staggering spectacle. The Milky Way isn't a faint smear. It's a torrent of spilled diamonds, so bright it casts faint, cold shadows on the ground. You've never seen so many stars. It feels less like looking up and more like looking out into the terrifying, beautiful depths of the universe. Muhammad points to a specific cluster and mutters a word. It's your first astronomy lesson. That group of stars isn't Orion to him. It's the camel's grazing ground. The stars are not myths. They are a map, a clock, and a calendar. Your survival depends on his ability to read it. A well-known historical anchor here is the centuries-old Trans-Saharan trade, routes carved not by maps, but by countless caravans over millennia, dealing in gold, salt, and slaves. But here's a strange, small fact. The camel saddles are specifically designed with high, wooden pommels fore and aft. You're not just sitting on a hump. You're nestled in a wooden frame. This isn't for your comfort. It's so that if you doze off, and you will from the heat and the monotony, you won't tumble off and be left behind. The desert has protocols for human frailty. And as you try to sleep on the unyielding stone, Listening to the camels' stomachs gurgle and the infinite whisper of the wind, you realize the profound isolation. The historians still argue about the exact mental toll this journey took on European travelers and conscripts versus the Tuareg and Arab guides for whom this was simply home. For you, right now, the isolation is a physical pressure, a weight equal to the satchel on your chest. You are a speck moving across a stone tablet. The only proof you exist, the only purpose you have, is contained in that leather bag. The ink on those pages has to be more permanent than you are. It has to survive. You close your eyes, the cold seeping through your blanket, the stars spinning overhead, and the swaying motion continuing, even in your dreams. That sway becomes your pulse. You wake to it before dawn, your body already moving with the camel's rhythm even before Muhammad's gentle tug on the lead rope signals its time. There's no grand sunrise spectacle here on the Hamada. The light just seeps back into the world, turning the blackness to gray, then to a washed-out, relentless beige. You eat a date, take a stingy sip, and the world begins to sway again. The stone plain seems infinite, a repetitive hell that makes your eyes ache with sameness. But then, after 2 more days of this, the land begins to change. It cracks and buckles. Gentle rises become jagged outcrops of black rock. The air smells different, sharp, mineral, almost burnt. You've reached the edge of the Hamada and are descending into a region the guides call the Haraj, a vast volcanic field. It feels like walking onto another planet. The ground underfoot is no longer solid stone but loose, skittering scree of volcanic slag. It clinks and shifts with every step, a sound like broken pottery. In the distance, you see the silhouettes of ancient cinder cones, their slopes smooth and dark against the sky. The landscape is one of violent, solidified chaos. Lava flows, now cold and twisted into fantastic, rope-like shapes known as pahoehoe, bar your path. You have to navigate around them. The heat here is even more intense, soaking into the black rock and radiating back up in visible waves. You feel like an ant crawling across a stovetop that was turned off only minutes ago. It's a sobering reminder that the Sahara isn't just a sea of sand. It's a geological museum with exhibits of terrifying force. Muhammad seems more alert here. He scans the ground not for pathfinders, but for specific, dark stones. He dismounts, picks one up, and hands it to you. It's surprisingly light, porous like a sponge. Hajar al-Ma, he says quietly. Waterstone. This porous volcanic rock can, in certain conditions, trap and hold tiny amounts of overnight dew. He shows you how to lick it, a minuscule dampness on the tongue. It's not a drink, it's a promise. A reminder that the desert, in its harshness, still offers the tiniest of mercies if you know how to look. The thirst becomes a character in your journey. At first, it's a background annoyance, a dry mouth. Then it becomes a persistent thought, nagging at the edge of your mind every time you look at the bulging water skins strapped to the pack camel. By the 3rd day in the volcanic field, it has moved in. It's a tightness in your throat, a slight fuzziness at the corners of your vision. You ration your sips religiously, but the phantom taste of cool water haunts you. And then you see it, a shimmering, beautiful lake ahead, ringed with what look like palm trees. Your heart leaps. You almost point, cry out, but you see Muhammad's back, utterly relaxed, not even glancing at the mirage. He knows it's not real. You learn to distrust your own eyes. The lake shimmers, tantalizing, always receding. It's the desert's favorite cruel joke. The real oases, you'll learn, often announce themselves with smell first, a damp, green, utterly alien scent on the wind, not with sight. A well-known historical event that shaped this leg of the route was the gradual drying of the Sahara, a process over millennia that turned grasslands into desert and forced human and trade routes into narrower, more defined corridors like the one you're on, dictated by the remaining pockets of water. But here's the odd fact. The volcanic fields, for all their hostility, were sometimes preferred by guides. The reasoning was counterintuitive. The hard, rocky ground was firmer for the camel's feet than soft, energy-sapping sand, and the distinct landmarks, that peculiarly shaped cone, that specific lava flow, were unmovable and perfect for navigation. You were trading one kind of hardship for another, betting on landmarks over footing. The historians still argue about the exact routes taken through these fields, as the evidence isn't in buried cities, but in faint, overlapping camel paths etched into the volcanic scree, paths that shift with every sandstorm. You follow Muhammad, trusting his memory of a map written in stone and shadow. The satchel of letters feels heavier, its purpose more abstract. What do invoices and family greetings matter in this stone wilderness? And then you remember, they're the only thing that does matter. They're the reason this brutal, beautiful, and deeply boring trek has any point at all. You lick the porous volcanic rock again, getting a grain of sand for your effort. The mirage lake shimmers, laughs, and disappears. You sway onward. The days blur into a cycle of heat, sway, and stone. But the volcanic field eventually spits you out onto its southern edge, and the world softens. The ground becomes a mix of sand and hard-packed earth, dotted with thorny, skeletal acacias and tufts of dry grass that crackle underfoot. This is the Sahel, the literal shore of the great desert sea. The tension in Muhammad's shoulders eases a fraction. You make better time here. And then, one afternoon, you smell it, a faint, sweet, verdant note woven into the dry air. Water, growing things, life. It's so foreign your brain takes a moment to process it. Soon, you see a smudge of dark green on the horizon that doesn't waver or disappear. An oasis, not a mirage, but the real, sprawling, messy miracle of Gatums, or one like it. Your arrival is not dramatic, but deeply sensory. The air grows noticeably cooler as you pass between the first high, earthen walls that surround the oasis gardens, a primitive but effective form of sun and sand break. The light turns dappled and green under a canopy of date palms. The sound of the wind, your constant companion, is replaced by the rustle of fronds and the musical, impossible trickle of water in a stone irrigation channel, a phallach. The smell is overwhelming. Damp earth, ripe dates, flowering henna bushes, and the musky scent of humans and animals living closely. After the minimalist silence of the desert, it feels like walking into a noisy, fragrant party. Your eyes, accustomed to vast distances, struggle to focus on the close, busy details. Women in bright robes drawing water from a well, children chasing chickens between mud brick houses, the piled heaps of freshly cut dates, glowing like amber. This is not just a rest stop. This is a hub, a node in the nervous system of the postal route. Muhammad leads you to a specific, unassuming house on the outskirts of the main settlement. Inside, it's cool and dark, the thick mud brick walls insulating against the heat. An elderly man with ink-stained fingers greets Muhammad not with exuberance, but with a solemn nod. He is the Kaitib, the scribe and station agent. You're shown to a small, bare room where you can finally, for the first time in weeks, take the satchel off your chest. The relief is physical, like removing a heavy stone. But your duty isn't over. You hand the satchel to the Kaitib. He doesn't open the private letters, of course. But the official dispatches? He breaks the seals with a practiced flick of a knife. He reads them quickly, his lips moving silently. Then, he takes out fresh paper and ink. Here's the ingenious, less-known mechanics of the system. The Kaitib isn't just a postmaster. He's a data processor. He transcribes the crucial information from the Ottoman dispatches, troop movements, supply requests, tax reports, onto a fresh, smaller scroll. This condensed version is what will be carried on the next, more dangerous leg south. The original bulky documents stay here, filed away in a wooden chest. This achieves two things. It lightens the load for the courier, you, immeasurably, and it creates a backup. If you are robbed or perish, the information isn't completely lost. It's safe here in this cool, dark room. You watch him work, his quills scratching in the quiet. Your grand mission, you realize, is really a relay race of information, passed from hand to hand, condensed and protected at every stage. You are less a hero and more a living, breathing USB stick. A very tired, sandy, and sunburned USB stick. You are given a real meal, a stew of goat and okra served with soft, fresh bread. The flavors are so intense, they almost hurt. You are also given a luxury you'd forgotten, a bucket of water for washing. The grime that comes off you turns the water a deep ochre. That night, you sleep on a proper reed mat, indoors. The silence feels wrong, too complete without the wind. But the sound that replaces it is the distant, rhythmic creak of the water wheel, the noria, lifting water from the deep well to feed the channels. It's a lullaby of survival. You think of the letters you've delivered here, their journey paused. You think of a new, lighter scroll you'll carry forward. A well-known historical fact is the role of oases like these as cosmopolitan trading and information centers, where sub-Saharan, Arab, and Mediterranean cultures met. But the quirky detail is this. The Kaidab often used a special ink for his transcripts, made from local gallnut juice and gum arabic. It was fade-resistant and, more importantly, unpalatable to insects and rodents that might gnaw on the archives. The historians still argue about how much editorial power these station scribes had. Did they simply copy, or did they subtly interpret or even censor information as it flowed through their hands? You watch the old man sand the finished scroll, his face unreadable in the lamplight. He holds the knowledge of empires in his stained hands, and for a night, you share in that quiet, profound responsibility. Tomorrow, the swaying begins again. But for now, there's the creak of the water wheel, the smell of damp earth, and the profound, bone-deep gratitude for a wall between you and the endless, star-filled sky. The respite is criminally short. Dawn finds you back in the saddle, the condensed scroll, now sealed in a slim, waxed leather tube, secured inside your robe. Leaving the oasis is a kind of mourning. The green fades behind you, the air dries, and the sound of water is swallowed once more by the wind. You're on a different camel now, a fresher one from the oasis's herds, and your small caravan has gained 2 more Tuareg guides. The terrain shifts again, becoming a series of vast, gravelly plains interspersed with enormous, skeletal dune ranges, the ergs. These are the postcard dunes, the ones that look beautiful in photographs and feel like a soft, golden hell to cross. Muhammad points to a distant, hazy line of them. That's your path. You approach the first great dune sea at a specific, narrow pass. This isn't random. For centuries, caravans have funneled through these passes, where the wind has sculpted a slightly more stable corridor between the mountains of sand. To venture directly over the tall dunes is to risk getting bogged down, or worse, triggering a slide that can bury a camel. As you enter the pass, the world transforms. The sky is reduced to a brilliant blue strip between high, sinuous walls of sand. The color is breathtaking, a palette of honey, apricot, and rose gold that shifts with the angle of the sun. The silence here is profound, muffled by the sand. The only sounds are the soft, labored shush of camel feet sinking in, the creak of leather, and your own breathing, amplified in the stillness. But this beauty is lethal. The sand reflects and intensifies the sun, creating a furnace effect. The heat is a physical wall, and the sand gets everywhere. It's in your cheche, your mouth, your ears, gritting between your teeth. You learn to keep your head down, to squint through your eyelashes. Progress is agonizingly slow. Each step forward feels like half a step back as the sand slips away. The camels, usually so stoic, grunt and blow with effort. You stop frequently in what little shade the dune walls provide, not to rest, but to let the animals recover. During one such stop, as you sip warm, sandy water, one of the new guides, a younger man named Ahmed, points to a peculiar feature on a dune face, a series of small, regular holes. He digs gently with his hand and extracts a fat, pale scorpion, which he swiftly dispatches. He then offers it to you. When you recoil, he shrugs and pops it into his own mouth, crunching it with a thoughtful expression. "Ma," he says, "water." The scorpion's body, he means, contains precious moisture. It's a walking, storing canteen. You decline, but the lesson is clear. In this environment, life is a resource, and survival demands a brutal pragmatism that rewrites all your civilized rules. A well-known historical element here is the constant threat of the samum, the poisonous desert wind said to bring madness and heat stroke. But the less discussed, constant danger is the sheer, mind-numbing monotony. In the dune corridors, every vista looks the same. Landmarks are swallowed by the shifting sand overnight. Navigation here relies on a deeper, almost instinctual knowledge. The guides read the shape of the dune crests, the alignment of the wind-sculpted ripples on the sand, like sailors reading waves. They're following a path written in a language of Aeolian geometry you can't even perceive. You are utterly, completely dependent. The satchel scroll feels insignificantly light compared to the weight of this dependency. The historians still argue about how many couriers and travelers simply vanished in these ergs, not from violence, but from taking a wrong turn by 100 meters, their remains and messages buried under the next season's shifting sands. As you crest a high pass between two dunes in the late afternoon, the wind hits you full force, a hot, dry blast that steals your breath. And below, stretching to a shimmering horizon, is an ocean of sand, wave upon wave of golden-orange silence. The scale is humbling, terrifying, and yes, profoundly boring in its singular, relentless purpose. It exists to be empty, and you have to cross it. Muhammad adjusts his che-che, his eyes already scanning the pattern of shadows on the distant sand sea. He clicks his tongue. The descent into the ocean of dunes begins, each step a tiny rebellion against being swallowed. The descent into the great sand sea is less a walk and more a controlled slide. The camels move with a careful, splay-footed gait, their bodies leaning back against the slope. Sand flows around their legs like liquid, hissing softly. You reach the bottom, and the world becomes a series of undulating curves. The sky is a dome of flawless blue, and the sun's position becomes impossible to judge, its light reflecting from every granular surface. You travel in the cooler morning and late afternoon hours, camping during the zenith of the day's heat in the meager shade of a dune's leeward side. The camp is a silent affair. Talking wastes moisture. Communication is a system of gestures, nods, and a shared understanding of people performing a familiar, arduous task. On the third day, in the heart of the erg, the air changes. First, the wind dies completely. The silence becomes absolute, a heavy, pressing thing. The camels grow restless, snorting and pulling at their leads. Muhammad and the other guides stop. They don't confer. They simply look north, their postures tense. The horizon, there is no longer a clean line. It's smudged, a hazy, dun-colored band that seems to be thickening, rising. It looks like a distant range of low, brown hills, but you know there are no hills here. Ahmed mutters a single word you've heard in fearful whispers at the oasis. Habub. A sandstorm. Not a gentle, dusty breeze, but the desert's full-throated roar. The guides move with a frantic, yet precise, urgency. This is not their first storm. The camels are forced to kneel, facing away from the approaching wall. The heavy packs, including the water skins, are lashed down tightly. You are ordered to wrap your che-che around your entire head, leaving only the tiniest slit, and to secure your goggles if you have them. In your case, you just squeeze your eyes shut. You are told to get down behind your kneeling camel, to use its body as a windbreak, and then you wait. The wall approaches with a terrifying, silent speed. The sun vanishes, turning the world a sickly, apocalyptic yellow. Then the sound hits, a roaring like 1,000 trains, a hissing, gritty scream. And then the world disappears. The first blast of wind nearly knocks the breath from your lungs, even behind the camel. It's hot, solid with sand. It scours every exposed inch. You can feel the individual grains peppering your leather robes. Feel the camel's body shudder against the onslaught. You bury your face in your arms, trying to create an air pocket. Breathing is a calculated risk. You inhale through the cloth of your che-che, tasting grit, feeling it coat your tongue and throat. The noise is overwhelming, a primal roar that blanks out all thought. Time loses meaning. You are a speck in a tan-colored universe of violent motion. Your only anchor is the solid, living bulk of the camel in front of you and the hard cylinder of the scroll pressed against your ribs. You think, absurdly, of the ink on that scroll. If the storm rips your robe open, if the tube is lost, the ink will be meaningless. The words will be gone, scattered into the billion identical grains of sand now filling the air. Your entire purpose is to be a container, and the storm is trying to empty you. It lasts for hours, or maybe it's minutes. In the roar and the dark, you can't tell. The sand finds its way into everything. Your nose, your ears, the seams of your clothes. You cough a dry, rasping hack. Eventually, the roar begins to diminish, fading from a scream to a howl, then to a mournful whistle. The solid blast of sand becomes a stinging spray, then a dusty mist. The light returns, a dim, brownish twilight. You dare to look up. Your camel is half buried, a mound of sand against its side. You are buried to your waist. The landscape is utterly, completely transformed. The elegant dune patterns are gone, reshaped into new, unfamiliar forms. Your carefully chosen campsite is unrecognizable. The guides are already moving, digging out the camels, checking the water skins. Miraculously, all are accounted for. Muhammad's eyes, red-rimmed and caked with dust, meet yours. He gives a single, slow nod. You survived. The system, huddle, face away, use the animals worked. A well-known historical hazard of the route was, of course, these storms, which could wipe out entire caravans. But here's the odd, practical detail. After a haboob, the guides would immediately scour the area for one specific thing, camel dung. The fresh droppings, now buried, were a vital resource. Dried, they were the only reliable fuel in a landscape now swept clean of any other burnable material. Survival wasn't just about weathering the storm. It was about managing the barren aftermath. The historians still argue about how many lost travelers were actually found, not by following landmarks, but by the tragic final evidence of a scattered camp buried in the new dunes. A silver button, a rusted knife, a water skin sucked dry. You help dig out the water skins, your hands raw. The scroll is safe. The world is new and hostile. As you mount up, your body aching, every crevice filled with Sahara, you look at the reshaped dunes. The path forward is gone. But Muhammad simply squints at the sun, now a pale disk in the still hazy sky, adjusts his direction by a few degrees, and clicks his tongue. The caravan moves on, leaving the storm's sculpture behind, writing a new, faint line across the fresh sand. The reshaped dunes play tricks on you. Your brain, desperate for familiar patterns, tries and fails to map the new terrain. Every crest looks like the one you passed before the storm. A deep, quiet fatigue sets in, deeper than muscle ache, a soul weariness from the constant, low-grade assault of heat, grit, and sameness. You're riding in a single file line, your mind drifting in the rhythmic sway, when Muhammad, at the front, raises a closed fist. The line halts. Absolute silence. save for the whisper of wind over sand. He's seen something you haven't. Then you see them. 3 figures on camelback, silhouetted on the crest of a dune to the east, motionless. They are too far away to make out details, but their posture is not that of fellow travelers. They are watching, assessing. A cold knot tightens in your stomach, cutting through the heat haze. Bandits. The whispered fear of every caravan. The Tuareg guides don't reach for weapons. Their long, straight swords are sheathed, their rifles slung. Instead, they bring the camels into a tight circle, kneeling them down to form a living fortification. You are pulled into the center. Your hand instinctively goes to the scroll tube beneath your robe. The weight of the letters of your entire purpose feels suddenly like a beacon. For a long, tense minute, nothing happens. The figures on the dune remain. Then, one of them breaks away and begins a slow, deliberate descent toward your position. He rides alone. As he gets closer, you see he's lean, dressed in indigo like your guides, his face obscured. He stops about 50 paces away. Muhammad stands, walks forward alone, empty hands held slightly away from his body. They meet in the no-man's land between the dune and your circle. You can't hear their words, only the low murmur of conversation. Then, a gesture. Muhammad points back towards you, not at you, but at the packed camel carrying the trade goods, the dates, the bolts of cloth, the small sacks of salt from the oasis. The negotiation is not about your life, you realize with a jolt. It's about tolls. The stranger nods. Muhammad returns to the circle and, without a word, begins unloading a portion of the trade goods. A sack of dates, 2 bolts of cheap cloth. He carries them out and lays them on the sand. The stranger inspects them, then gives a curt nod. He doesn't take the goods immediately. Instead, he makes a sweeping gesture with his arm towards the south, your direction of travel. Then he remounts and rides back to his companions. The 3 figures watch as your caravan repacks, rises, and begins to move again. As you pass beneath their dune, you feel their eyes on you, but they make no move to follow. You paid the tax. The forgotten postal route, you understand, has its own shadow economy, its own unofficial customs officers. The bandits aren't just predators, they're part of the ecosystem. Their presence, in a twisted way, enforces a form of order. They prey on the unprepared, but they have a vested interest in the route remaining viable enough for caravans to keep using it and paying. A well-known historical reality is the constant tension between nomadic tribes and the caravans, a cycle of raid and trade. But here's the less-known nuance. Often, the bandits were from the same clans as the guides. They might have been distant cousins, rivals from a different faction. The negotiation you witnessed wasn't just commerce. It was politics, a delicate balance of honor and necessity conducted in a language of gestures and implied threats. Muhammad never tells you what was said. He just rides, his face grim. You realize the scroll's value was never discussed. It was either invisible to them, just a traveler's personal effect, or, more likely, protected by an unspoken rule. Information, especially official information, was a dangerous commodity. Interfering with it could bring the unwelcome attention of an empire down upon an entire tribe. The historians still argue about the complex web of allegiances and extortions that made the route function, a system where a sack of dates could be as crucial as a letter from the Sultan. The encounter leaves you shaken, not by violence, but by the realization of how thin the veneer of safety is and how it's maintained not by law, but by a fragile, understood self-interest. You clutch the scroll tighter. It is your passport, your reason for being here, and the thing that, for now, makes you more useful alive than dead. The silhouettes on the dunes shrink behind you, swallowed by the golden haze. The price of passage has been paid. The swaying continues. Days of golden nothingness eventually yield to a different kind of starkness. The great dunes taper off, replaced by a flat, stony plain strewn with black, volcanic rocks again. a sister to the Harrods you crossed weeks ago. The air feels drier, if that's possible, and the wind carries a finer, more persistent dust. Just as the monotony threatens to dissolve your mind into the haze, you see it, a squared-off, unnatural shadow on the horizon. As you draw closer, it resolves into a low, mud-brick fort, its walls bleached pale by the sun. It looks less built and more like a growth that erupted from the desert floor and then fossilized. This is Sava, or a place like it, an Ottoman frontier garrison, the loneliest outpost on the edge of nowhere. The approach is silent. No grand gates, no bustling activity. A single, listless sentry leans on his spear by a dark opening in the wall. He doesn't challenge you. He just watches with the hollow eyes of a man who has run out of things to look at. Inside the walls, the feeling is not of military vigor, but of profound, dust-choked stagnation. A handful of soldiers, their uniforms faded to the color of the sand, move with a slow, dreamlike pace. The air smells of smoke, cooked lentils, and despair. The fort's commander, a Binbashi major, whose once fine tunic is now frayed at the cuffs, receives you in a room that serves as his office, armory, and sleeping quarters. His eyes light up not at the sight of you, but at the sealed tube Muhammad presents, a connection to the world, to authority, to a reality beyond these walls. He breaks the seal with trembling hands, devouring the condensed dispatch. His face falls slightly. It's not the reinforcements or the payroll increase he'd hoped for, but routine orders, inventory requests. Yet it's something. It's proof that someone, somewhere, knows this fort exists. He then hands you a small bundle of letters, the garrison's outgoing mail. They are heartbreakingly mundane. A soldier's scrawled note to his mother in Anatolia, the commander's official report, a request for more quinine. These flimsy papers represent the entire emotional and administrative life of this forgotten place. You're their lifeline. The weight of the tube shifts. It is now heavier with the loneliness of 20 men. You are offered a place to sleep in the barracks, a dank, windowless room shared with 2 silent soldiers. Dinner is a thin lentil soup and hardtack. Conversation is spare. The soldiers ask few questions about the world outside. It seems to pain them to think of it. Instead, they show you their one pride, a small, struggling lemon tree growing in a sheltered corner of the courtyard, nurtured with stolen bits of their own water rations. It has borne 3 small, hard, green lemons. They point to it as if showing you a cathedral. This is their monument, their act of defiance against the desert. You understand, then, that the true enemy here isn't raiders or thirst, but the sheer, crushing weight of oblivion. The postal route doesn't just carry letters. It carries the antidote to madness, the faint echo of a world that remembers. A well-known historical fact is the Ottoman Empire's struggle to maintain these remote garrisons, often staffed by conscripts exiled to what felt like the end of the earth. But here's the strange, small detail. The fort's ledger, which you glimpse on the commander's desk, recorded everything in exquisite detail. Grains of rice, bullets, bundles of fodder. Yet, the most carefully tracked item was ink. The inventory of ink pots and their usage was scrutinized more than ammunition. Because without ink, they couldn't write reports. And if they couldn't write reports, they ceased to exist in the imperial bureaucracy. Their reality was literally held in the fading ink of their own communiques. The historians still argue about how many of these forts simply evaporated, not conquered, but abandoned when the letters stopped coming. The men inside slowly absorbed by the silence, their lemon trees withering, their walls melting back into the dust from which they came. That night, you lie awake listening to the wind howl through the fort's parapets, a sound so constant the soldiers no longer hear it. The scroll tube and the new bundle of letters are under your head, a lumpy, essential pillow. You're no longer just a courier. You are a memory courier, carrying the proof that places like this, and the men in them, are real. The lemon tree rustles in the night wind, a tiny, rustling sigh in the immense dark. Leaving the fort feels like abandoning a sinking ship. The soldiers watch you go with those same hollow eyes, as if part of them is leaving with the outgoing mail. You ride south, and the land begins a barely perceptible descent. The air, while still hot, loses some of its lethal desiccation. A few more hardy acacias appear, and then, one morning, you see a line on the horizon that isn't a mirage. It's too long, too low, and too still. As you approach, the line resolves into a breathtaking sight, a caravan, but of a scale you couldn't have imagined. Hundreds, perhaps 1,000 camels, moving in a slow, sinuous line across the plain like a giant, dusty serpent. This is no postal run. This is a salt caravan, the lifeblood of the deeper Sahara, and you are about to merge with its ancient flow. Muhammad guides your small group to the caravan's flank, exchanging calls with its outriders. You are absorbed into the immense, plodding organism. The noise is the first shock, a deep, composite rumble of thousands of hoof falls, the groan of wooden saddles, the shouts of drivers, the braying and snorting of the camels. The smell is overpowering, animal sweat, dung, and the sharp, clean scent of the salt slabs themselves. Each camel carries 2 or 3 massive rectangular blocks of salt, strapped to its sides with complex networks of rope. The blocks are mined from the heart of the desert, from places like the fabled salt mines of Tadeni, and are being carried south to Timbuktu and beyond, where salt is worth its weight in grain, sometimes in gold. This is the real economy of the Sahara. Your postal route is just a fragile thread stitched alongside this massive, ponderous artery. You travel with them for days. The rhythm is different, slower, more deliberate, governed by the needs of 1,000 animals. At night, the caravan encamps in a city of tents and temporary corrals, the fires stretching as far as you can see. You share a meal with the salt drivers, men whose lives are measured in round trips between the mines and the markets. Their hands are cracked and white from handling the salt. Their stories are not of empires, but of specific dunes, of good years and bad years of the mines, of camel breeds and the price of millet and gin. Your mission feels abstract and bureaucratic next to their tangible, backbreaking trade. One driver, an elderly man with eyes narrowed to slits from a lifetime of squinting in a sun-glazed salt flats, points at your satchel and asks what's in it. You say, "Letters." He nods sagely and says, "Light load." "Good." Then he offers you a piece of the salt. You break off a small chunk and tentatively lick it. It's intensely, purely salty, a shock to your system that makes your dehydrated body crave water instantly. He laughs, a sound like grinding stones. That, he says, is real. Paper dreams are light. This, he taps the 200-pound slab beside him. This is heavy. This is what people need. A well-known historical fact is the Trans-Saharan salt trade, which predated Islam and shaped the rise of West African empires. But here's the peculiar detail. The salt slabs were often used as a form of currency and measurement during the journey. A driver might pay for fodder at a way station by chiseling off a corner of his slab. The size and purity of the salt block were its value, and disputes were settled by comparing the crystalline structure and taste. Your official Ottoman scroll, with its imperial seal, meant nothing here. Value was literal, tactile, and salty. The historians still argue about the exact trade ratios. How many pounds of salt for a pound of gold dust in Timbuktu? But they often miss the social world of the caravan itself, a moving, temporary society with its own laws, hierarchies, and oral history, of which your postal run was a minor, ephemeral sideshow. As you ride alongside the endless line, the rhythmic crunch of salt-laden footsteps becomes a new kind of white noise. You feel both humbled and absurd. You're carrying whispers. They are carrying mountains. Yet for a few days, your paths are the same, your fuses burning toward the same distant point on the map. The scroll in your robe feels lighter than ever, a feather against the monumental, grinding weight of necessity just an arm's length away. The salt caravan, in its monumental slowness, becomes your entire world. Its dust coats your throat, its rhythm syncs with your pulse. But your paths must diverge. The caravan will stop at major watering holes to rest the animals for days. Your smaller, faster postal party cannot afford the delay. With quiet nods to the salt drivers, Muhammad leads your group away from the giant serpent, angling southwest on a more direct and notoriously waterless trail towards Timbuktu. The land turns harsh again, a flat, gravelly plain studded with thorn bushes that offer no shade. The real test begins now. The heat becomes a sentient thing, a heavy blanket smothering thought. Your water skin, which felt reassuringly full when you left the last well, now sloshes with a dreadfully light, final-sounding quantity. Muhammad rations it with a tyranny born of necessity. Your sips are timed, measured by the sun's arc. The thirst returns, but it's different now, deeper, more insistent. It's a dry ache in your bones, a fuzziness behind your eyes. Your lips crack and bleed. Talking is unthinkable. You move in a silent, swaying tunnel of personal misery. The landscape shimmers and dances. You see things, pools of water that are just patches of lighter stone, trees that are twisted rock formations. Your mind, starved of moisture and stimulation, begins to project its own desperate fantasies onto the blank canvas of the desert. On the third day of this purgatory, you begin to lag. Your head throbs with a low, relentless beat. The world tilts slightly with each step of your camel. Colors bleach out. You're vaguely aware of Ahmed dropping back to ride beside you, his watchful eyes on your slumped posture. You try to wave him off, but the gesture is weak. The next thing you know, your camel is kneeling and strong hands are pulling you from the saddle. The ground feels improbably cool. Muhammad is there, his face close to yours, his expression not angry, but clinically assessing. He says a word, Sama. Sun sickness. Heat stroke. It's not just exhaustion. Your body's cooling system is failing. You're an overheated engine seizing up in the middle of nowhere. What happens next is a lesson in ancient, non-textbook medicine. They don't pour precious water on you. Instead, Ahmed unfolds a large, coarse blanket made of woven camel hair. They lay you on it in the meager shade of your kneeling camel. Then, they take your chay and soak it, not from a main water skin, but from a smaller, special skin Muhammad carries. The liquid he pours is dark, viscous, and smells sharply of herbs and dates. It's a concentrated syrup, a precious elixir for emergencies. They wring out the cloth in this sticky liquid and wrap it around your head, your neck, your wrists, the pulse points. The effect is not immediate coolness, but a strange drawing sensation. The syrup seems to pull the heat from your skin. Then, they take dry, powdery sand from the shade of a bush and begin to gently bury your legs and torso in it, leaving your chest and syrup-wrapped head exposed. The sand, insulated from the direct sun, is significantly cooler than the air. You are being packed in a natural desert cooler. You drift in a hazy, disconnected state. They force a tiny amount of the syrupy liquid between your cracked lips. It's unbearably sweet and salty at once, a shock that kickstarts your swallow reflex. Time loses meaning. You are a body being tended to by a millennia-old protocol. A well-known historical danger of the route was death by dehydration and heat stroke, a common end for the unprepared. But here's the little-known, brilliant practicality. The treatment you're receiving was a standard Tuareg remedy. The sand burial wasn't just for cooling. The pressure was believed to stabilize blood circulation. The herbal syrup often contained ingredients like niter, saltpeter, which can actually induce a slight vasodilation, helping to cool the core. The historians still argue about the pharmacological efficacy of these desert remedies, but they cannot argue with the survival rates of those in the care of experienced guides versus those who tried to push on with just water and willpower. You're a living testament to a science written in survival, not in books. As the fierce afternoon wanes, the fuzzy edges of your vision recede. The throbbing in your head dulls to an ache. They dig you out, help you sip plain water now, and sit you up. The world swims back into focus, harsh and real and unbearably hot, but no longer actively hostile to your existence. Muhammad gives you a hard, appraising look, then a single, slow nod of approval. You didn't die. You've passed an involuntary, brutal initiation. You mount your camel with shaky limbs. The scroll tube is still safe in your robe. You nearly failed your mission not to bandits or storms, but to the sun itself, the most banal, omnipresent killer of all. As you sway forward into the evening's relative cool, you feel a new, profound respect for the simple, brutal wisdom of the blanket, the sand, and the dark, sweet syrup. You are alive, and you're still, somehow, the courier. The world softens. The gravel gives way to sand, then to patches of dry grass. The thorny acacias become more frequent, and you see the first baobab trees, their massive, bulbous trunks looking like they've been planted upside down, roots clawing at a pinkening evening sky. The air carries new scents, wood smoke, livestock, the dense, sweet smell of mud and humanity. You crest a final, gentle rise, and there it lies, sprawled in a great bend of a sluggish, pewter-colored river, Timbuktu. It's not a city of gold. From this distance, it's a city of mud, a low, dun-colored maze of flat-roofed buildings and winding streets, punctuated by the elegant, finger-like minarets of its famed mosques, the Jingareber and the Sankor. It looks less like a metropolis and more like a natural outcropping, an extension of the earth itself. But after months of empty horizons, it's the most magnificent, complex thing you've ever seen. The Niger River, a broad, brown ribbon of life, glints on the city's southern edge. Canoes, like water bugs, move across its surface. There are actual boats. The sight of so much water, motionless and vast, is almost disorienting. Your arrival is not triumphant. You are dust-covered, thin, moving with the stiff, worn-out gait of the desert. You enter through one of the city's ancient gates, the heat and smell of the desert replaced by a cacophony of life. The streets are narrow, shaded, and teeming. You hear a dozen languages: Songhai, Tamashek, Arabic, Bambara. You see scholars in fine robes carrying wooden writing boards, Tuareg traders in from the desert, Songhai farmers with baskets of millet. The smell is overwhelming. Spices frying fish from the river, tanned leather, donkey dung, and the pervasive, comforting scent of the mud brick walls. Your senses, starved for so long, are flooded. You feel dizzy, overwhelmed. Muhammad leads you unerringly through the labyrinth, away from the bustling markets, towards a quieter quarter. You arrive at a nondescript doorway. This is your destination, the Dar al-Maktutat, the House of Manuscripts, though it looks like any other building. Inside, it's cool and quiet. The air smells of old paper, leather, and the sandalwood used to protect against insects. An elderly alpha, scholar, with a wispy white beard and eyes that hold a calm, deep intelligence greets Muhammad with quiet respect. He turns to you. You fumble with numb fingers to retrieve the waxed leather tube from inside your robe. It feels warm, alive. You hand it over. The alpha takes it with a reverence usually reserved for religious texts. He doesn't open it immediately. He places it on a low table, then brings you a small cup of sweet, mint tea. The gesture is one of profound welcome. Your journey is over. He finally opens the tube, extracting the scroll. He reads it quickly, his lips moving silently. He nods, makes a note in a large ledger. Then he does something unexpected. He goes to a vast chest and retrieves another, smaller tube. This, he explains in halting Arabic, is the return correspondence. Letters from Timbuktu scholars to their peers in Tripoli and Cairo. Merchants' replies. Local reports for the Ottoman officials. Your satchel is not empty. It is refilled with a new set of hopes, questions, and accounts, all condensed into another slim cylinder. You are not a terminus. You are a turnaround point. The system is a loop. You will rest here for a few days, then you will begin the long, familiar hell of the return journey. The realization is both crushing and validating. You have completed your task, only to be handed its mirror image. A well-known historical fact is Timbuktu's role as a center of Islamic scholarship and trade, a fabled city of gold. But the lesser-known, crucial detail for the postal route was its function as an intelligence and clearinghouse. The Alpha you met wasn't just a postmaster. He was a synthesizer. Information from the desert outposts, from the salt caravans, from local rulers, was compiled here before being sent north. The condensed scroll you carried was the final, refined product. The historians still argue about the volume of this correspondence, much of which was lost or destroyed by humidity, time, and later conflicts. But for a moment, in that cool, silent room, you are the thread connecting two worlds of thought, commerce, and power. You sip your mint tea, the sweetness a shock on your parched tongue. Outside, the sounds of the legendary city drift in. A donkey brays, a vendor calls, a muezzin begins the sunset call to prayer. You made it. You deliver the mail. And now you have to take it back. The few days in Timbuktu pass in a blur of strange contrasts. You sleep deeply in a quiet room in the scholar's house, lulled by the distant, rhythmic sounds of the city instead of the wind. You eat food that has flavor, fish stew with okra, millet porridge sweetened with honey. You even bathe in the Niger, the brown water feeling like silk against your sand-scoured skin. You are a human being again, not just a vehicle for a scroll, but the rest is charged with purpose. The Alpha is meticulous. He doesn't just hand you the return tube. He gives you a brief, quiet briefing. He explains the network. The route you just traveled is only one filament in a vast, invisible web. There are other couriers, he says, moving on different axes, east towards Agadez and Egypt, west towards Mauritania and the Atlantic. Some travel with the great salt caravans as their sole cover. Others move in small, fast groups like yours, carrying the most urgent or sensitive packets. The information flows like water, seeking the path of least resistance, pooled at nodes like this house, and then channeled onward. The scrolls are often written in a kind of shorthand or cipher, he implies, especially those dealing with trade prices or political matters. The true contents are known only to the sender and the intended recipient. You are not a postman. You are a synapse in a continental nervous system that operates on trust, memory, and sheer, stubborn endurance. He shows you something remarkable, a map. Not on paper, but etched into a large, cured leather hide. It shows the Sahara not as empty space, but as a network of lines connecting dots. The dots are oases, wells, mountain passes, specific rock formations. The lines are not straight. They curve to avoid ergs, to hit seasonal pastures, to follow ancient, subterranean watercourses. Timbuktu is a dense knot in the center. Tripoli is another on the northern edge. Your route is there, a faint but definite line. Looking at it, your journey transforms in your mind from a haphazard ordeal into a predetermined, almost ritualized passage. Generations of feet, hooves, and hopes have worn this line into the very fabric of the land. You have just walked a well-trodden idea. A well-known historical reality is the existence of these trade and communication networks. But here's the truly esoteric, little-discussed fact. The most critical part of a courier's training wasn't desert survival. It was memory and discretion. Couriers, especially those handling sensitive material, were often chosen for their prodigious memories. They were expected to destroy the physical message if capture seemed imminent. but to carry the core information in their heads, to be verbally delivered to the recipient. You were a living letter. The scroll in your tube was a backup, a formality, a tangible token. The real message might be a string of numbers, a specific phrase, a change in a market price that you had committed to memory before even leaving Tripoli. The historians still argue about how much of the Sahara's history is lost because the most important messages were never written down, only whispered from one dust-chapped mouth to another in the shelter of a tent, then forgotten. As the Alpha rolls up the leather map, his eyes meet yours. He has not given you any such verbal message. Your cargo is purely physical, but you understand the principle. You are part of a system that values human memory over paper because paper burns, gets wet, or is stolen. Minds, though fragile, can be more resilient. On your final morning, you prepare to leave. The return tube is sealed, a mirror of the one you arrived with. Muhammad has resupplied the caravan. Fresh dates, grain, filled water skins, and a new pack camel. The farewell is as quiet as the greeting. The Alpha places a hand on your shoulder for a brief moment, a gesture of profound respect. Fiaman Illah, he says, go in God's safety. You mount your camel at the city gate, turning your back on the bustling river, the scholarly hum, the smell of bread baking. You face north. The desert stretches out before you, identical to the one you crossed, and yet completely different, because now you know what lies on the other side. You know the fort's loneliness, the oasis's trickling water, the bandits' watching eyes, the storm's roar. The return journey is not an adventure. It's a recollection. You sway out of the city's shadow, the new scroll a familiar weight against your heart. You're no longer just carrying mail. You're carrying a reply. The return journey is a haunting echo. You retrace your steps, but everything is reversed, seen from the other side. The landmarks are familiar, yet changed by the different angle of light, the shifting of a dune. Your body, now hardened and adapted, suffers less from the initial shocks, but a deep, mental fatigue sets in. This is the curse of knowledge. You know exactly how far it is to the next well and how agonizing each mile will be. You know the scent of the approaching habub before the camels grow restless. The terrifying has become routine. The wondrous has become mundane. The Sahara no longer holds mystery, only repetition. It is profoundly, achingly boring in a way that grinds at your soul. You meet the great salt caravan again, this time heading north with slabs traded for gold and grain. You exchange silent nods with drivers you recognize. It feels like meeting fellow commuters on a monstrous transcontinental train line. You stop again at the mud brick fort, the same listless sentry. The commander's eyes are even more desperate as he hands you a new bundle of letters, the same mundane hopes a year older. The lemon tree, you notice, has one less fruit. Something in the fort's spirit has dimmed. You deliver the replies from the south, which seem to confuse rather than comfort him. The world outside is moving on, and his outpost is a fossil. You leave quickly, the taste of their lentil soup and despair lingering. It's on this return leg that you notice the first cracks in the ancient system. At a small oasis, a way station you used on a southward trek, the old Kaidib is gone. In his place is a younger, impatient man who seems more interested in the price of European cloth arriving via the coast than in the meticulous transcription of dispatches. He glances at your official tube with disinterest. The ritual feels hollow. Then, at another stop, you see it, a new, shiny object in the possession of a trader from the north. A brass cartridge case for a modern rifle. It's a tiny thing, but it speaks of a world changing at its edges. The balance of power that kept banditry in check, that enforced the unofficial tolls, is subtly shifting. The old rules, written in sand and understood in gestures, are being overwritten by rules written in treaties and enforced by faster-firing guns. But the desert itself doesn't change. The habub still roars, the thirst still claws, the stars still guide. Your reliance on Muhammad and his knowledge is absolute. You've developed a silent, efficient partnership. You know his gestures, his rhythms. He knows your limits. You are a functioning part of his machine. One evening, as you camp in the lee of a familiar basalt outcrop, he does something unusual. He points to the North Star, then sweeps his hand across the constellation-dusted sky towards the south, tracing the path you've taken. He then taps his temple and points to you. It's a simple gesture, but its meaning is clear. You have the map in your head now, too. It's the highest compliment he could give. You're no longer just cargo. You have been, in some small way, initiated. The route is inside you. A well-known historical process was the encroachment of European colonial influence and modern technology into North Africa in the late 19th century, which would eventually render routes like this obsolete. But here's the subtle, on-the-ground detail. The first sign of the end wasn't a steamship or a telegraph wire in the desert. It was a change in attitude. It was the disinterest of the new Kaidib, the trader's preference for imported goods over local networks, the gradual drying up of the smaller oases due to overuse and changing climate, making the old, precise waypoints untenable. The historians still argue about the precise moment the forgotten postal route became forgotten. Was it a specific year when no courier was hired, or was it a slow fading, like a caravan track disappearing under fresh sand? You feel it now, not as a historical fact, but as a slight chill in the wind, a faint rustiness in the ancient, perfect machine you are a part of. You sway onward, carrying replies that feel increasingly like relics. The desert doesn't care. It will outlast the empires, the trade routes, and the messages. Your purpose feels both vital and vanishingly small. You are a ghost, already walking a path that is fading beneath your own feet. The final stretch back to the Mediterranean feels like rewinding a spool of thread, the landscapes unreeling in reverse order. The vast gravel plains, the oppressive volcanic fields, the final, endless Hamada Alhambra. The familiarity is a double-edged sword. Your body moves on autopilot, your muscles remembering the specific tilt of a dune, the exact rock where you sheltered from a storm. But your mind is adrift in a strange melancholy. You are a living anachronism, walking a path whose reason for being is evaporating with each step closer to the modernizing world. The proof becomes undeniable at the last major oasis before Tripoli, the same place where you first learned of the scribe's transcription system. The atmosphere is different, busier, but with a different kind of energy. There are new goods, cheap European mirrors, bolts of Manchester cotton, iron tools. And there is talk, excited talk, of a new project. A French proposal, whispered between traders, to build a chemin de fer, a railroad, from the coast into the interior. The words are alien, futuristic, a machine that could cross in days what has taken you months. It sounds like a fairy tale, a ridiculous fantasy. But the way the traders discuss it, with a keen, calculating light in their eyes, tells you it is a threat as real as any sandstorm. If the railroad comes, what need is there for the swaying camel, the leather water skin, the man who walks with a tube of letters against his heart? Your entire existence, the brutal skill set you've barely survived to acquire, is on the verge of becoming a quaint, useless curiosity. Muhammad feels it too. He is quieter, more withdrawn. His world, the world of the Azalea, the salt caravan, and the silent desert crossings, is being measured, mapped, and priced by men in offices who have never felt a hubbub sting. The old tolls paid to desert bandits will be replaced by state-sanctioned tariffs. The stars will be supplanted by sextants and printed maps. The unspoken trust between guide and courier will be rendered obsolete by schedules and tickets. You see in the way he looks at the new trade goods, not with desire, but with the grim recognition of a tide he cannot hold back. One evening, he doesn't point out the stars for navigation. Instead, he simply looks at them, as if memorizing their faces for the last time. You perform your final duty as a synapse. At the oasis, you deliver the return scroll to the local agent. The ritual feels hollow. The man reads the condensed messages from Timbuktu with a distracted air, already thinking of the price of railroad bonds. He hands you the original, bulky letters you left here months ago, the ones you carried from Tripoli. They feel like artifacts from another age. You are to deliver them to their final recipients in the city, completing the loop. But the loop itself is breaking. A well-known historical pivot was the scramble for Africa and the technological revolution of the late 19th century. But the intimate, human truth of obsolescence is felt in small moments. The last craftsman making a specific type of camel saddle that won't be needed, the last scribe mixing gallnut ink for a dispatch that will be the final one. The historians still argue about whether the couriers themselves saw the end coming, or if they were simply left without a summons one season, bewildered as their purpose dried up like a lost well. You, however, see it. You are witnessing the last golden hour of a millennia-old system. The weight of the original letters in your satchel is now the weight of history itself. Not the sweeping kind, but the quiet, ending kind. You mount your camel for the last push to the coast. The desert stretches behind you, holding all your memories of thirst, fear, and awe. Ahead lies the blue sea, and a world ready to forget the path you just walked. The swaying continues, but it feels less like a journey and more like a long, slow farewell. The blue of the Mediterranean is a shock to the system. After months of gold, ochre, and rust, the vibrant, liquid azure feels almost artificial. The city of Tripoli erupts around you. Whitewashed buildings, the clamor of a busy port, the smell of salt and sewage and baking bread replacing the pure, severe scent of dust. You feel like a ghost returned to the land of the living, out of step with its rhythms. Your gait is still the slow, rolling walk of the desert. Your eyes still squinted against the sun that no longer needs to be fought with such intensity. You deliver the satchel. You stand in a cool, tiled courtyard as an Ottoman official with clean, soft hands breaks the seals on the letters you guarded with your life. He scans them, nods, and places them in a pile with other paperwork. There is no ceremony, no recognition of the epic they have survived. You are handed a small, heavy purse, your pay. The transaction is complete. You walk out into the bustling street. The noise is jarring. Donkeys bray, merchants shout, ship rigging clinks in the harbor. You find yourself missing the wind. You buy a cup of sweet tea from a stall and sit in a shaded alcove, watching people who have never known true silence, true emptiness. The purse of coins in your hand feels insignificant compared to the knowledge in your bones. You think of Muhammad. He would have melted back into the desert with his payment, perhaps to guide one more caravan, or perhaps to watch as the world he knew slowly closed its gates. You'll never see him again. The partnership forged in silent survival is severed by the noisy reality of the city. Your journey is over. The forgotten postal route has been walked one last time, though you didn't know it was the last as you walked it. Soon, the telegraph lines will stitch the continents together with instant, chattering dots and dashes. Steamships will make coastal routes faster and safer. The railroad, that absurd fantasy whispered in the oasis, will eventually push its iron tentacles south, making the months-long ordeal a matter of dusty comfort from a carriage window. The ancient, fragile, human-powered network of memory, trust, and endurance will be relegated to the realm of legend, then to a footnote, and then to the title of a sleepy history podcast. You didn't just carry letters. You carried the final whispers of an age, the last pulses of a dying nervous system. You were there at the end, and in carrying it, you became a part of its story, a story now complete, sealed, and delivered into the past. The images in your mind begin to soften at the edges now, like dunes blurring in the evening haze. The scorching sun cools to a remembered warmth. The gritty feel of sand smooths into the softness of sheets. The relentless, forward-swaying motion slows, settles, becomes the gentle rise and fall of your own breathing in the quiet dark. You've left the desert behind. Its vastness, its silence, its brutal lessons are now just a story your mind tells your body as it unwinds. The forgotten route is remembered one last time in the peace of this moment. The fears of bandits, the ache of thirst, the roar of the storm, all of it is over. All that's left is the deep, calming knowledge that you arrived. You completed the loop. The message was delivered. The tension you carried, mile after mile, can finally be released. Let go. Let the sound of the wind fade into the sound of your fan or the distant hum of the night. Let the stars above Timbuktu become the gentle dark behind your eyelids. You are safe. You are still. The journey is done, and rest, deep and earned, is here. Just breathe. Let the story melt away, leaving only a sense of distant, weathered peace, a quiet expanse, a soft, dark silence. End of script. Sweet dreams.